questions or comments or anything you want to talk about. So yesterday, I finished up talking about this, our strategies to create last mover advantage. So how to convert our last mover status into long-term advantage, meaning how do we, as an early or first mover in our market, position ourselves to be the company that captures the majority of the growth in the market during the expansion phase. So we talked about this in general strategy terms, two components to the strategy: IP strategy and competitive strategies that create barriers to entry. This is what distinguishes successful last movers from failed first movers. So I want to add a few more thoughts on that. And I believe that we face the extremely difficult challenge as a startup of competing with established companies. And established companies have many advantages over startups. Established companies are further down the learning curve. They have reputation, branding, they have cash flows, they have economies of scale, and maybe have complementary assets. These are all tremendous advantages. And however, every advantage comes with a disadvantage. And this is the underlying rationale for a basic startup strategy to compete with established companies. I like to draw a parallel here with the military or martial arts strategy. So is anybody here trained in martial art? Military?
Used to.
So, okay, so let's say you're in a situation where you are facing a much larger and more powerful, stronger opponent. So, what do you do?
Moving around, hiding the weakness.
Looking, yeah, so what don't,
I'm looking for their movement.
so what don't you do?
Straight ahead.
You don't just go straight ahead and attack, frontal assault, like trying to fight against their strength. And same thing in military. If we're smaller force against a much larger force, we don't mass for head-on assault and throw ourselves suicidally against the larger opponent. What do? We look for a weakness that comes from the source of the strength. So, for example, in the martial arts case, if an opponent is large and strong, they may also be slower and less flexible than us because we're smaller, therefore maybe more nimble. So we would want to turn the fight to one that depends on speed and agility rather than strength and size. And that's what we can also do as startups, attacking large companies. We don't want to attack large companies on brand or cash flow or economies of scale because these are all areas where they have us crushed. We want to attack them in an area where they're weak. And where are large companies generally weaker than startups? What's the most obvious and relevant area of weakness for large companies for us?
Egos.
Egos?
Did you just say speed and agility?
Oh, that was in my martial arts example. So yeah, that could be another part of our strategy. But don't fool yourself about egos either. I mean, startup entrepreneur founders can have also huge egos. Yeah, I mean, think about it. If let's say you're running a tiny little company right now that you plan to dominate the whole market, or the whole world with the same company, that also requires some pretty big ego. So I think, that could be an area where there's it's a comparable size. But the area that I like to focus on is innovation. This is where we go back to my early discussion about the value of innovation for a startup, which is what? Startups or small companies in general are better at innovating than big companies. And this is both, has a theoretical basis and also empirical evidence.
We usually use the analogy of a speedboat versus a tanker.
Yeah. Okay. Speedboat versus tanker. Oh, yeah.
Oil tanker, yeah. Takes a very, very, very big, very long time to turn. Very hard to stop.
Tank.
Tanker. Ship, ocean, tanker.
Large ocean-going tanker.
Yeah.
Like I like to use the example of the analogy of small mammals versus dinosaurs. So if you think about the areas that what are situations where small and nimble creatures beat large and powerful creatures? We just go back and look at the meteor that hit or the asteroid that hit the Earth 65 million years ago and wiped out all the dinosaurs. And who survived? Well, the small mammals. I mean, insects, fish, and small mammals. Insects, birds, fish, and small mammals were the survivors. So, yeah, and the ancestors of people. So why was it that the insects, birds, small mammals, and fishes surviving dinosaurs were eradicated? Because dinosaurs were much more dependent on the existing ecosystem. As the kings of the existing ecosystem, as huge creatures, they were deeply embedded in the existing ecosystem. They had to eat a tremendous amount of food. Starting with, they had to eat a tremendous amount of food every day. So they were uniquely well adapted to the ecosystem as it existed then. This is the same thing with large companies. Large successful companies are successful because they are uniquely adapted to the current ecosystem. That's how they generate their success. This makes them uniquely vulnerable to innovation and especially disruptive innovation. And this is why investors are so interested in disruptive innovation. And this is why you see innovative disruptor companies like Airbnb and Uber achieving $65 and $25 billion valuations in disruption. This is why you see so much investor excitement about fintech startups, because banks are like dinosaurs. Fintech startups are like small mammals. The investors see that the landscape or the environment of financial services is shifting in such a way that it favors the smaller and more nimble companies over the big companies. So why are big companies subject to attack by innovation? Why do they find it difficult to innovate? Because big successful companies have big successful value chains, including customers, partners, and supply chain, which they depend on their success for. So as the value chain shifts, it's very difficult for them to shift ahead of it. They might react to that when they have no choice, but it's hard for them to proactively shift. Example, when, let's say, E-Trade introduced online brokerage, cutting out broker network, cutting out the physical broker to create a brokerage where people could make small trades online. So they basically don't need to have a brokerage force like EF Hutton or one of the big players at that time. So it's very difficult for the existing leaders to just fire their own brokerage team because this is the source of their strength. The same thing in a personal computer. How come Dell was able to beat IBM? Dell was a company founded by a teenager with a few $1,000s, no real technology innovation, just a business model innovation, but he disrupted the personal computer industry. How did he do this? With direct, customized sale of computers to end users. So mass customized direct sale, where he basically pioneered the business model of building on demand, customized computer to sell direct to an end user. Now, why can't, you know how he did that originally? What was his first channel?
Direct sale.
And how did he do the direct sale?
He takes money first, door to door.
Oh, maybe after that. Next iteration was a mail order catalog. He basically printed a catalog and sent it in the mail. And now, why couldn't IBM do that? Like IBM, why couldn't IBM print their own catalog and send it? Because one reason was IBM already had a very extremely profitable sales channel that included their salespeople, their distributors, and their retailers. And to start cannibalizing that supply chain with, or that sales channel with mail order catalog was very difficult organizationally for them to do. The organizational structure of large successful companies is appropriate to the current task and the current market. So like one of my favorite examples of this, Nokia and smartphone. So what company invented smartphone? Nokia. Nokia had a smartphone 10 years before Apple. And who invented the tablet? Nokia. So Nokia had an iPad-like phone way before Apple. So, and Nokia, like a lot of people, I think when they think about Nokia, they think, oh, they weren't, they just fell behind in research and development. Not true. Nokia spent billions of dollars on research and development, and they developed very advanced phones way ahead of Apple. So why did they fail? Why did they fail so badly? In 2006, they made maybe one of the worst decisions in corporate history to abandon their smartphone effort and focus their energy on feature phones. Feature phones are that, and of course we all know what happened in 2007. Apple launched the iPhone and totally turned the handphone market on its head. And then shortly after that, Nokia went into a deep dive from the #1 phone and handset company in the world to out of the business. And why did that happen? It wasn't that they were stupid. It wasn't that they didn't do research and development. It wasn't that they didn't know about smartphones. I believe one of the most important reasons was their organizational structure. So their organizational structure was organized around different types of phones. So they had the smartphone division and the feature phone division. And the feature phone division was making all the money. And feature phone division, I wasn't there, but I expect that feature phone division probably argued, the smartphones are a distraction, we should focus on feature phones. There's billions of people around the world that don't have a feature phone yet. Let's focus on our strength and let's continue to invest in products that actually make money. It was a reasonable argument, but it was exactly wrong because their organizational structure was based on the past, not based on the future. And innovation is also difficult for larger organizations because risk aversion. Larger organizations will be more risk averse than startups. Because why? Because they have more to lose. If you are Citibank, you have a lot more to lose than if you're a fintech startup. If Citibank really screw up, or if you're a decision maker in Citibank and you really screw up, you can lose millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars in where if you're a fintech startup and you screw up, you lose a couple $100,000 or $1 million, that's it. So, and
the problem is when people work with big companies, they expect stability. So that's the selling lines of like a lot of big companies that if you work with us, you're not stable and you work for a startup company, right?
But that's good for us. That's good when we compete with these companies.
Then start growing big, and then they start attracting people who are, risk averse.
Yeah. But good startups, as they grow into larger companies, they maintain some of that, risk-taking atmosphere or risk-taking culture. But yeah, eventually, if we get successful enough, then we'll become a big company too, and then we'll have to figure out how to deal with this from the big company side. Yeah. But I like the example risk aversion. You look at fintech, and one of my favorite examples is digital currencies, cryptocurrencies. Why were there so many successful startups in digital and cryptocurrency spaces? How come large banks have, even until now, not really taken a lead position in digital cryptocurrency? Risk aversion, because legal and regulatory uncertainty. Did we talk about this already? Legal and regulatory uncertainty?
We did mention.
So did we talk about the three types of companies? Three types of your red, green, and red? No. So this is another way that startups can challenge established companies. we look at, we leverage off the risk aversion that successful companies will have. So I like to think about it this way. Let's think about a very specific type of risk, which is, I call legal and regulatory uncertainty, or legal and regulatory risk. So the way I have traditionally analyzed legal and regulatory risk vis-a-vis startups, there are three types of businesses you can start. One is clearly legal with an L. It operates in no area of legal uncertainty. L. I call this green. This is a green area. And then there's the red area. Red is, this business is clearly illegal with an I. And I have always felt you can't start a clearly illegal business and get investment. And then there's a gray area, which is in the middle. Gray area means, legal and regulatory gray area means, it's not clear that what you're doing is legal or illegal. Because it's, example, digital or cryptocurrency. So for many years, and even up until now, digital and cryptocurrency businesses operate in legal and regulatory gray areas. That means we don't really know whether what they're doing is legal or not. But it's clearly not, it's not clearly illegal, but it's not clearly illegal either. This can be a great opportunity for a startup. Why? Because, again, established players will not go into legal and regulatory gray areas. If they're public companies, they can't do it because their corporate governance would not allow. And if they're large private companies, they're also going to be extremely hesitant. If it's like a bank, which operates with a license from government regulators, they're also going to be extremely reluctant to operate in legal and regulatory gray areas. So when in our first fund, we invested in, and I actually was co-founder in a company that was doing digital currency bank. So we launched a virtual bank focused on Second Life. Second Life was a virtual world, still existing, but back then, 2006, 2007, it was very much in the news and growing fast. It had a digital economy based on a currency called Linden dollars. And so we launched a virtual currency bank in Second Life, taking deposits and also issuing loans in Linden dollars. So this was a quite disruptive idea back then. And this was before Bitcoin. Bitcoin didn't come until 2009. So we were way ahead of Bitcoin, and we were one of the leaders in digital currency innovation. But before we launched this company, I went to talk to MAS, Monetary Authority of Singapore, who are the regulator, bank regulator in Singapore, and asked, do I need a banking license to launch this business? Because we operate like a bank, but in fact we're not a bank because we don't deal with any real currencies. So, you know what was the answer that I got?
How's it say no?
Yeah, the answer that I got was, we don't know. We're not sure because we don't really understand this. And and I went to talk to several people, and everybody that I talked to gave me basically the same answer. We don't know. And finally, the last person that I talked to, after having gone to several people, the last person that I talked to said, why don't you go ahead and try and see what happens? See if anybody complains. If somebody complains, then we'll look into it. So I thought, is this a good answer for me?
Yeah, good enough.
Good or good, bad, or medium, or indifferent?
I think it's a very good answer.
Very good. This is exactly what I wanted to hear. Because if they had told me definitely no, then I wouldn't do it. That's illegal. If they had told me definitely yes, then this opens the door to everybody doing it. Like, for example, Citibank. Why can't Citibank wants to bank in Second Life? But by telling me they're not sure, I realized Citibank will never do this until they're sure. Because if you're the guy in charge of making this decision at Citibank and you hear from MAS we're not sure, that's a no. Because this will never be approved by anybody higher up at Citibank. And in fact, many years later, I did end up talking to the guy at Citibank that was responsible for this area and told me they went through the exact thought process. We would like to do this, but we're not sure we're going to do it. So this can be a great opportunity for startups to leverage risk aversion of large players who will not venture into gray area, legal regulatory gray areas, among other types of risk aversion. So, but interestingly, over the last couple of years, I had to revise my structure because previously I only had red, green, and gray. But now I've realized in the last few years there's another category, which is orange. Orange is clearly illegal, but violating laws that are unenforceable, like Airbnb and Uber, which are operating in contravention of laws in many places where they operate, but without any significant legal sanction. So this is another way that startups can challenge existing players, finding businesses that violate laws that government cannot or won't enforce, because again, large players will not go into that space. If you're an established company, you're not going to start a business that's illegal, but law is not enforced. And I think Airbnb and Uber are very smart in picking those laws because they found not exactly legal regulatory loophole, but they found an area of law where government has no willpower to enforce. Like, why doesn't government shut down Airbnb and shut down Uber?
Distributed. They distribute it over small city. So it's like, okay, they can fight small cities, but there's no central regulatory system like all over the world that can really shut them down.
What the government could do if they really wanted, they could start arresting Uber drivers and just make examples of a few, and pretty soon many people would sign up, right? Like if you saw Uber drivers getting dragged into jail every day on TV, I think a lot fewer people would be willing to sign up for Uber driver. And if they went and dragged people that were renting out their homes on Airbnb and threw them in jail and made examples of them, you would see a lot fewer people renting out a house on Airbnb. So why doesn't government do that?
Because the government doesn't like startups. They like instruction, they like doing things, and the regulation can change. It's not fair or whatever.
Maybe that could be one reason, but I think there's another important reason. Like, who are the beneficiaries? Like, who's driving Uber cars? Who are the people driving Uber cars?
Drivers.
And
I'm not sure actually. I think car owners actually get somebody to drive their cars.
like the people that are driving Uber cars, they're ordinary citizens. They're not criminals. I mean, they're not otherwise criminals in most cases.
Tax.
So they're ordinary citizens who, in a lot of countries, vote and pay taxes, and government doesn't want it. And who are the beneficiaries of the laws that these people are violating? They're like rich taxi companies who everybody hates. So I think government doesn't want to crush individual citizens who are actually just trying to make some money in favor of special interests who are holding taxi licenses or special interests who are holding hotel licenses, and throw ordinary citizens in jail who are just trying to make a little money. Now, and for example, definitely if Singapore wanted to do this, I mean, Singapore is very small. Everybody who's renting their house on Airbnb is on Airbnb. It is illegal. If the government wanted to crack down, they could do it very fast. And Singapore government usually doesn't have any hesitation in enforcing their laws. So I'm pretty sure they're not doing this because they don't want to be dragging ordinary citizens off to jail to favor hotel owners and then face the music on that in the next election. So anyway, I think not advising them to go find some law you can break in your startup by this. It's just another example of the risk aversion playing to the strengths of startups versus established companies. So, summarizing the most attractive opportunities that favor startups, we look at situations of characterized by disruptive technologies and business models where existing firms are frozen in the headlights of impending change. And this enables us to take advantage of uncertainty. And we, as a general rule, like to focus on discrete versus systemic technologies based on people. And we like to enter markets that are unattractive to existing competitors, meaning market niches where existing large players cannot compete successfully. So, again, if we look at the example I raised before, Dell versus IBM, why was Dell so successful at beating IBM? One is the existing supply and value chain that IBM had, but two was the fact that IBM was basically frozen in the headlights of the change in the computer industry from mainframe to mini microcomputer to desktop computer, and also the change in business model from Salesforce selling into retail channels to direct sale. And they were unable to react quickly enough to that change, and this left an opening for disruptive small players like Dell to grow from a tiny little operation running Dell to catalog to become one of the most successful PC hardware companies in the world. And they also use this bad customer strategy. So who was the initial market niche that Dell focused on? Not exactly normal. I would say not exactly normal. Like,
Let's say one that wanted to customize.
which was
Like,
but who wants to customize their home computer? And this is like 1980s or early 1990s. Who wants to customize their home computer back then? Geeks. So originally Dell focused on geeks, and they focused on geeks and gamers and computer enthusiasts who wanted to build a customized computer, which was not most people. But what made this an attractive market for this market? Again, we talked yesterday about we have a lower cost and we provide a better value for customers. Remember that blue ocean strategy? So they did exactly this. They lowered their cost by dramatically shortening the value chain, but they provided a better product for their customers because their customers wanted a customized computer, where a typical IBM customer did not want a customized computer. The typical IBM customer wanted thousands of identical computers. And actually, I was an IBM customer at this time. I was an IBM customer at the time that Dell was coming into the market. I was involved in and actually partially responsible for selecting what computers we would buy at JP Morgan for investment banking. And we had 3,000 in New York, and we had 3,000 people involved in investment banking in New York. And we would purchase 3,000 computers at once. And every time a new generation of the processor came. So what we wanted was absolutely identical computers, because we didn't want customized computers that we had to worry about configuration on. So we were a perfect customer for IBM. And in fact, we were a big IBM customer for many years. But I remember when I first encountered Dell, when I was making the involved with next generation buying decision. I can't remember if it was like going from 286 to 386 or 386 to 486, which wouldn't even know what that means now, but back then that was a big deal. Now probably the computational power in those computers is less than you get in like your Apple Watch or any smartphone, but back then it was a big deal. And I remember when I was faced with this decision, the IBM computer and the Dell computer, which were essentially identical specification. The Dell computer was selling for $4,000. You know how much the IBM computer was selling for? And
Is it more expensive? More than 10? What was that?
yeah.
What year?
This was like 1989, 1990.
Please, still a mainframe.
No, desktop computer.
Desktop.
It was
Yes.
like 2,000 something, 3,000, 18,000.
How much?
What are you talking about desktop?
Desktop computer.
Like IBM PC?
Yes, IBM.
It's about $3,000.
Any other guesses?
25.
It was $16,000. 16,000 per computer. And we're buying 3,000 computers, so it's $48 million, $50 million. So imagine how attractive this is to IBM. But when I was confronted with the Dell, so I said, "Oh, Dell's selling similar spec computer for $4,000. IBM computer is $16,000. So which one should I buy?" Yeah, and then, but actually I talked to the IBM sales rep, and I had a very good relationship with the sales rep because he would visit all the time. And he was really friendly, and nice, and smart, and bring gifts, tickets to US Open, tennis, stuff, like, take out for dinner or drink, whatever, like, because that's what IBM salespeople did. They were the best salespeople in the world. IBM was proud of that and built a tremendous reputation based on that. But and actually I remember the sales rep name was Scott. So Scott didn't have a big problem because now we were looking at this decision, which computer to buy, and IBM computer is $16,000 and Dell computer is $4,000. What should we do? I would like to buy IBM, but how do we justify this? So we said, well, let me check it out. We're going to compare. So I came back the next day with the comparison, and we said, definitely, we have compared these two computers, and although the specs appear identical, but the IBM keyboard is much better than the Dell keyboard.
Oh,
And
you paid 10,000 more for a keyboard.
yeah, and it's true. Actually, the IBM keyboards, those IBM keyboards for that computer were some of the best computer keyboards ever. And actually, I still have two at home, which I keep in the closet. And if you do an internet search on, keyboard, there are people that collect these keyboards because they are the best keyboards ever made. Like, you can hammer nails with the keyboard all day and then it still works. And So, but it's okay, but how about we just buy the keyboard? How about we just buy the Dell computers and then we can get IBM keyboards? So what is it?
Now, there's the prices that I see. It's about 2,500, 2,000, 1998. 1998.
98?
Yeah.
This was 1989 or 1990.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So the prices came in guaranteed it was this was the price.
No, because I remember I bought a PC in Israel.
Yes.
And it wasn't it was a few thousands of dollars, not
I'll tell you
15.
I'll tell you, don't search anymore. Only get that right now, it's $500. The price was 16,000. No search.
16,000.
Yes. Everything.
Could be. 16,000.
I wanted to get all the witness statements on this weekend.
That's not okay.
Apple cost 8,500.
No, make my
1989. That's Apple. Apple was about 2-3 times more than anybody else.
This would not. Don't worry, I'll find it. I'll find it. It's okay, I'll just save you $500. So, okay, and then, and by the way, if you look at what this computer did, I bet you get that computer for free. But, so I said,
Or you have to pay a lot of money because it's a museum.
collectible.
Yeah.
Keyboard, and then we also came back with a detailed calculation about the fan. So the cooling fan. So the cooling fan on the IBM was much more efficient, and therefore it wouldn't heat up the desk area so much, and therefore we wouldn't have as air conditioning bill the same as with a Dell computer, and we could save a lot of money. So I was like, "You're joking, right? I mean, there's got to be a better argument than this." And he was like, "No, sorry, that's all we can do." And in the end, I bought all Dell computers. So, and I felt like, actually, I can just buy 3. If they don't last, I just swap out. I buy 3, keep 2 in the closet, and then when they break, we can just rotate, and we'll still save 25%. Yeah. So this was now Dell, because they started with the geek market, where customers really cared about interchangeable, changing the motherboard, or changing the graphics card, and overclocking the processor, and all the other things they wanted to do. But from there, they moved to small business, and then they moved upstream to large corporate, and then pretty soon IBM had to sell their whole computer business. So this is your new startup, new firm strategy to be established players. Okay, so now I'm going to go look at customer in a little more detail. So far we focused on customer at a pretty high level, like how many customers are there, how big is our market, how fast is it growing. Now we want to look at, we want to start looking at customers at a more granular level. So these are some of the factors that we want to consider when we are analyzing our customers. Like, for example, let's say we have a B2B business. Oh, we have one more person on Zoom, right? Let's see 4 people now. Oh yeah, Adelbert. Somebody messaged me. So we are selling into a corporate customer, B2B. Who are the participants in the buying decision? So in some cases, there could be as many as 5 participants in the buying decision. Here, in this example, I look at the end user, the person that's actually using the product, influencer, the person that actually influences the end user, recommender, the person who actually recommends the influencer, economic buyer, which is the person that really pays for the purchase, and decision maker, the person that approves the purchase. So you have to make sure that you are well aware of the structure of the value chain, and you understand the incentives and disincentives at each step in the value chain, and that you have structured a value proposition in such a way that you can appeal to each of these participants, and also that your marketing strategy takes into account all of these participants. So, have I talked before about our interactive outdoor advertising company?
Yeah.
So you can see that was an example of not identifying all the key participants in the B2B value chain. I was in a similar situation also when I was at JP Morgan. It was like when, let's say you wanted to sell some software, to JP Morgan. So who do you approach?
Vice presidents, managers.
Oh, but who? Let's say pick a particular type of software. Let's say you have oh, forget it. Instant messaging, to sell instant messaging into an investment bank, you might it's going to be like 2 or 3 years. Yeah, we'll make it easier. Like, let's say you're just trying to sell some new type of analytics software, for somebody to use inside of the bank. So who do you approach? Who's involved in that decision? First of all, who do you approach, and who's involved in the decision? Manager. Manager with what? Okay, let's say for example, it's foreign exchange, let's say it's an FX analytics platform that people who are doing FX sales can use to analyze trade opportunities.
People who actually use it.
Okay, so let's say you go talk to an FX salesperson. So they would be, in this case, they would be end user. But then what?
And you have convinced them so that they convince their manager to purchase the software first.
So how do they try the software?
And then tries.
Yeah.
Demo.
Demo what?
You can send out a salesperson to do a demo on software for the people who actually use it. And the end user.
We'll take the demo
On the demo.
on a notebook. Bring the salesperson brings a notebook and demos.
Nowadays, I think they do it through like Zoom or some Go meetings and things like that.
So screen share.
Screen
Okay,
share.
so screen share demo, and then we expect them to recommend after that, or we want them to try.
We wanted to try.
Okay, we want them to try. Now, how do they try new software inside JP Morgan?
They don't.
They don't. Like when I was in JP Morgan, maybe things have changed now. I don't think they changed that much, but you could not install your own software on your computer, and you could not access new software from outside without getting some sort of approval. Because why? I mean, okay, now who are the other constituencies that come into play?
Security.
So one is data security. That's why I said this is messaging. Forget like, are you opening any security holes in our infrastructure with this software? And then who else comes into play?
Wrong.
Maybe compliance side, if there's any sort of proprietary information that goes into the software. How about the IT side, like integration? How does this work with all the other software that we have installed? Does it conflict with anything else? Like, so does it interfere with anything else? So what about the in-house developed software that we have? Does it integrate with that, or does it interfere with that? So there's many people that get involved. So for example, let's say I was an influencer and end user, but recommender might be advanced technology group. Economic fire would be the purchasing department, and the decision maker would be department head. So then purchasing department, like no matter what else happens, purchasing department can't purchase anything unless the vendor's on the approval list. So your whole pitch to the end user, you can never sell anything because you have to go back and then get on the approved vendor list. Yeah, so you need to really think about who are all the participants in this process. Yeah. And then that process can take a long time. Yeah. So
that's why I came one of my other ideas. Well, not idea, it was more than, it was a prototype. But one of the problems was that I had to work with universities. I had two problems over there. First of all, there are procurement processes, very complex and elaborate. Second of all, I had to deal with too many stakeholders in the organization in order to, but actually too many stakeholders that had a stake in actually having the solution in the campuses. And basically, from procurement perspective, that's also very complicated because now they need to get
approval from the other party.
Yeah.
So then how would the big company purchase something new?
they very rarely purchase something new.
Exactly.
I mean, it's really hard. So this is another reason why you might not. It's very difficult if you're an innovator to try to sell new products to the company, because even if there's advantage for the company just to get into the purchasing process, it can be very difficult. And then there's another factor I forgot to mention. Like, remember when I was considering this buying decision between Dell and IBM, one of the arguments that I got from some other people that were talking to me about the situation was, nobody, they said this, and this was actually a well-known phrase at that time, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. Meaning, yeah, I mean, let's say if you're buying like $50 million worth of computers, it's a pretty big decision, even for a big company. And if you make that decision wrong, you might, depending on what else you have on your side of the knife, you might get fired. But so the idea there is actually very powerful. Like people that are, for example, buyers within large companies, they may have an incentive to stick with established players, even if the solution is not that good. Because if they switch to a new player and that goes wrong, like, we also looked at, in addition to Dell, we looked at Gateway. Gateway was another company like Dell back then, doing mass customized to computers and users. And we had, I ordered like 10 Dells and 10 Gateways to test out, and like 2 of our Gateways had exploding screens. Oh, maybe they were working with Samsung. But yeah, and then I was like, forget it, I'm not getting no matter what, because we're not having exploding screens in the office. So understanding the customer, like, and not just for B2B, like another thing I like is this customer web influence map. So I hear, like, when we talk to, I talk to a lot of startups, and they say, how are you going to advertise and promote the product? Well, we're going to use social media. Well, okay, that's great. What's social media? And then, do you really know, for example, what social media your customers are using? Like, who is the customer and what social media are they using? Like, for example, me, I use, like, I look at Facebook, pretty much every day. I'm on messaging product every day. I look at Instagram a little bit, Twitter not that much, and that's my main social media. So you're trying to reach me. If you're trying to reach me through YouTube, you have a problem, because I'm very rarely on YouTube. I'm usually on YouTube with my son, and then he's looking at kids stuff. So if you're trying to get a message to me through YouTube, it's going to be hard. On the other hand, if you're like a teenager in Thailand, you're only looking at Facebook and YouTube, that's it. So if you're going at them through other social media, you miss. If you're trying to, I hear like startups saying they're going through fashion blog. So, which fashion blog? And are your customers actually looking at that fashion blog? So you really need to understand not just customers at a high level, like when a lot of startup marketing plans do, we'll see, well, we're targeting young working professionals who are 24 to 35, which I think that's almost useless information. What does it mean? Where are they getting the news? Where are they getting their information? Where are they getting their recommendations? I think there's a huge range. And if you don't really know who the customer is, you're going to have a really hard time getting the message to them. A, structuring the message in a way that's interesting to them, and B, getting the message to them. So we'll get to this in a minute, but we usually like to look at something called customer archetype to get a better feeling for that. Another really interesting exercise I think it's good to go through is what we call a day in the life of a customer. So day in the life of a customer means thinking about one of our typical customers. What is their day like? Because we're assuming that customers are going to use our product. That's why we're launching a new product. So I always like to start with the question, where and when are they going to use it? Like, let's take your own day, for example. How much downtime do you have in your day?
I forgot what is downtime.
Zero, right? Like, for most of us, like, we're doing something every minute of every day. From the minute we get up to the minute we go to sleep. So that means, where do we get the time to use a new product? We must be repurposing some existing time, right? I'm assuming, let's say you don't have a gap in your day which is dedicated to trying new products, which I think none of us have. So therefore, in order to try a new product, you must stop doing something else and start trying a new product. So what is that something else, and when does it happen, and where are you when it happens? Because this also has a huge impact both on, can have a huge impact also on product design and on your marketing channel and message. I had a great example of this. I was working with a company. They were developing a new app for high net worth individuals to get customized news about their investment areas of interest, track their portfolios, get trade ideas, and maybe even execute trades. So, and this was about 2 years ago. And the idea was focusing on very busy and not just regular high net worth, but pretty much super high net worth, not super rich, but not ultra high net worth, but super high net worth. So basically, we had a customer archetype, which is this person is probably, let's say, 40 to 50 years old, and they're the CEO of a mid-sized company. So you think about that person's day. You think your day is busy, like they're CEO of a mid-sized company, like this person's day is packed by 15-minute intervals scheduled. So we were talking about when and where is this customer going to use the product. So I was saying, let's walk through your assumptions about that. And note that the product design was such that it can only be run on you can only really use it on an iPad, on a tablet. You couldn't, or a computer, but you couldn't use it on a smartphone. So, because why? Because the design side, the product side, wanted to make sure that the user experience was very rich. They wanted to have an interface that was graphical, look good, functional, allow the user to do a lot of things, and they felt they needed a minimum tablet-sized screen real estate to use this product. So I said, okay. And they said, but don't worry about that, because we already checked, we've done the market research, and our customers all have iPads. So that sounded good, right? But then I said, okay, so when is the customer going to use the product? Because you're a busy CEO, when do you have time to sit down with your iPad and start checking your portfolio, getting trade information, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, we think they're going to use it in between meetings, because the customer's day is very full of meetings. I thought, okay, that sounded good. So where is the customer going to be between meetings? And typically they're going to be in a car traveling from one meeting to another. So, okay, so far so good. But then said, okay, where is the iPad when the customer is in the car? Like, yeah, I mean, if I used to carry my iPad around, but I carried it in my bag. And when I'm in my car, or in a car, the bag is in the back. And I'm not stopping when I get in the car to open the bag and pull out the iPad. So basically, I'm sitting in the car, my iPad is in my bag is in the back, and I'm in the car looking at my phone. So I said, this product has to work on the phone. No, it can't work on the phone. And actually, I also said, this was just when the big screen phones were starting to become popular. She said, but in a big screen phone, it can also have a good experience. And actually, do you think people are going to be buying iPads in 2 years? Because actually, I totally dumped my iPad after I got the big screen phone. I mean, I still have 4 iPads, but never used. So, because
Just one.
what's that?
Just one. Well, not today.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm still, yeah. I actually have 2 iPads. One iPhone, but
Yeah, I have an iPad, but just give it to my kid, or just can't. Now I mounted one on top of my treadmill, so in terms of carrying around, I feel like, the big screen phone is good enough. Anyway, so, but they said, no, we can't run on the phone. So I said, well, if you can't run on the phone, and the customer can't use the car, what are they going to use? Well, maybe they'll use at home when they get home. But when at home? When they come home from work, and then sort of pick up the iPad when. So you can see where this leads, right? Like we have missed a huge issue, which is customer will never use this product because we haven't figured out how to fit into the day of the life of the customer. So this you might have seen before. This is something called the customer archetype. So this type of customer analysis can be very useful to understand better who's the customer. One way we try to do this is to think about the customer in more personal way. So we try to think not just about demographic groups, but think about if our customer was an individual, who would they be? And this helps you understand where they get their motivation, how do they behave, where they get their ideas from, and this can result in more effective marketing. All right, so next, this brings us to channel strategy, but since we have reached, we've reached 4:25, so almost 4:30, so how about we take our break now? We'll take let's take a 20-minute break, and we'll return at 4:45. Okay, but
20 minutes.
20 minutes. So, okay, people on Zoom, we're going to take a 20-minute break, and we're going to resume at 4:45. So we'll see you back here in 20 minutes.
Probably more than 20 minutes.
This is our optimistic.
Really means usually what's takes to go over there, get a coffee. It's always the case.
Lady is very responsive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, participants on Zoom and in person. I want to talk a little bit about channel strategy, channel and sales strategy. So, I'd like you to consider this. Like, who loves to sell? Who loves to sell?
Some guys I know love to sell.
But who in our room loves to sell?
Anybody.
Raise your hand if you love to sell.
Make sure that yes.
So if they make a sale, I'd love to make a sale.
You want to sell yourself? No.
I think like
I can sell ideas, I can sell this, but to let somebody put money on something. This is why the room is so much better than this.
Oh, this is fine.
It's sharp.
So I think if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you better learn what to sell.
Yeah.
Because you're okay, get somebody else on the team that can do that, it's okay. But you are, first of all, like, no sales, no company, everybody dies. You know, no sales, no company, company dies. And that's problem one. And then problem two is, okay, like, I believe that when you do things that you don't love to do, it's really hard to be excellent at these things, because something like sales also is competition. You're selling against all the other people who are selling. And when somebody loves to do something, they're going to be much more passionate about doing it by definition, and they're going to find it easier to do, and in the end, they're going to be very difficult to beat. So, as an entrepreneur, also, you're not just selling your product, but you're selling your company, you're selling your vision, you're selling to not just customers, but you're selling to the media, you're selling to potential strategic partners, you're selling to new team members, you're selling, and you're selling like around the clock, 7 by 24 by 365 for the next 10 years to get to exit. So if you have to work hard to do that, it's really difficult to.
How about the distinguish one thing I really hate to do is to close the deal. So I do all the other work and get somebody else to do it. How bad is it?
Before you do that, you need to, how to say, you need to guide the employees or the person who will understand the concept, the orientation, the vision, especially about the product, the strategy, the ability to the market. So, firstly, you have to, as lead, you should be a simple or it should be an example for all the clients.
I think there's a problem. There's a cultural problem in my country. That selling is a dirty job.
Wait, which country is this?
Israel.
Israel.
It's funny, but that's the kind of thing that.
They say that Israel is the next sales.
I would greatly doubt it, but no, obviously I was teaching, so I was selling a lot of things. A lot of people actually really enjoyed it. But talking about money is considered to be dirty.
That's the
Having grown up in a family, like
So yeah, so usually like
the people in my family think the same way.
yeah.
Family.
Yeah.
They can say, oh, guys, they talk all the time, they don't do any work.
I think sales people are
The economy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Money is considered to be a dirty thing.
Yeah.
You're right. People like.
So that's
Not
what
supposed to
you
talk about money.
That's the old
So you
No,
got
some of the other thing is that, people with money, like, if you're a rich person and if you like extravagant with your money, then people will look down at you, right? So even the people, the richest people in the country, usually they're very, very, very modest. They will not have the fastest car and all this and that. So talking about money is supposed to be something that you don't really do, right? Like nobody asks you in Israel, how much do you earn?
So
Or things
we
like
need to
that.
start closing the babies and out.
In a way, yes. It's an art, yeah. So how do you go about doing it? So, but what happens is that, the big managers will do the big meetings and then we leave the details to the sales team. Right?
Usually that's not true.
Huh?
Usually that's not true.
No, so that means that we never really talk about the.
Well, for me, like closing,
I don't know,
it's like closing the deal is one of my favorite moments in life.
That's the kind of thing that I always feel uncomfortable. And I have to talk about it. I feel
This is
really uncomfortable.
this is better than sex.
Nothing is better than sex.
There's nothing. Close the deal. Close the deal. Okay, you got your.
Well, no. I think, when you have a customer and you get the payment, obviously, that makes you feel really, really well. But talking about the nitty details, that's the thing that.
nowadays people, the sales people.
A lot.
In the company, sales people are those who earn the most.
I don't know. Whenever I talk with a salesperson,
Key things.
Yeah, sales
It's the
people
key.
earn
It's
the
when
most.
all the operations sales.
I mean, let's think about it this way. Okay, which wins? Great product or great sales and distribution? Which wins?
of course.
Great sales and distribution. Actually, great sales and distribution is the key to the company's success. So if we don't have great sales and distribution, let's say we have the best product in the world, but we can't sell and distribute, we're going to do that. Let's say we have an okay product, but we can sell and distribute it. So I think, but it's a very interesting discussion. I mean, there's a lot of emotional issues and psychological issues around sales and selling.
I have to work on it.
Yeah, it's
I'm going to have to work on it. This is not,
Oh, and that's why I picked these photos. I mean, actually, I carefully selected these photos to spark this discussion. Because I think when you see these salespeople, you get a very negative impression, right? All the negative stereotypes that we have about sales and salespeople are coming out from this slide. But I wanted to have to make a point about why. Like, what is it that makes people uncomfortable about sales? And what's the difference between good sale and not good sale? So when you look at these salespeople, why do you, I mean, nobody wants to be like this, right? Like, what's wrong with these salespeople?
The one on the left is like, I just nailed you kind of thing. You sucker.
seem pushy, like seem like got some bad expression on the face, and then fundamentally, what's wrong?
Overreacting.
You always feel like you've been taken for granted when you look at them. Like they got you. You didn't get a good deal. It's a win-lose.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
And why? Why do we feel like that?
Because
What's the difference between this and great sales? Great salespeople.
the salespeople make you buy the products, inside the products, and they don't push, but they clean.
Yeah, that's my point. Exactly.
Win-win.
Like,
So you basically get out and you feel like you got a good deal. You feel good about it.
great sales is hidden. Meaning, what's wrong with these salespeople is you look at them and you know right away they're selling. That's why you feel uncomfortable. Nobody wants to be sold. All the things that we were the feelings we were talking before, it's like we're being sold. And people don't like to be sold, and they don't want to feel like they're selling others. So I think the best sales and great sales is hidden. When not hidden in deceptive, but I mean not visible. When great salespeople sell you product, you don't know that they're selling. You think that they're helping. You think that they're solving the problem for you. You feel like you want to buy, not that you're being sold. So this is the key to good sales or great sales. You need to sell in a way that does not feel like sales. As soon as a customer, sophisticated customer, feels like they are being sold, they're not interested. So this is what you want to develop in your own sales. Probably a lot of us already have this. But develop an own sales technique and also help the sales team to develop this capability. And this starts with our value proposition. So we all have an innovative product that solves a painful customer problem, which means, in a way, we're halfway there because we already have a product that solves the problem. We're not just trying to push the product onto people that they don't want or don't need. But on the other hand, sales and distribution beat product every time, and products don't sell themselves. So if you can't sell or you don't have somebody on the team who is an extremely effective salesperson, you're in deep trouble. And if we think about the successful entrepreneurs that we know, the great entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs, for example, is really not like a super technical guy. He's an amazing salesperson. And that's what creates great companies. Somebody at the top needs to be a super effective salesperson.
So you mean that when you see the problem of the customers, and then we have the product over there, the point is how to bring, or it doesn't mean you have to educate the customer again.
You mean what's the process?
Yeah.
So I think it's generally it's about presenting a solution to a problem that the customer has. And then they see that, wow, this is actually exactly what I want. And they want to then buy the solution rather than have to push the solution. So I think this is
my one-on-one or in terms of for group people or group of customers or in mass market.
Well, I think generally in our sales strategy, generally sales strategy, they should be embedded in all the sales messages that we have, one-on-one or a small group or a large group or medium message.
Actually, I think Steve Jobs was successful in selling because he created an innovative product. So is it because of his skills of sales, or I think it lies in the products?
No. I get what you're saying, but I think that's only one part of the picture. I think because innovative products also don't sell themselves. And then if you read any of these biographies of Steve Jobs, they always talk about his reality distortion field. The reality distortion field that he had. Have you read about this? This is like where he could basically convince anybody of anything. Even though.
So when you walk into this field and then
once people got sucked into this reality distortion field, they would basically believe anything that he said, no matter how untrue it was.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I never met him, and I don't know, the best case, but I have definitely read this in several biographies of him.
Maybe we give other sense that he's very, very smart. So the people who in front of him, they might think that, oh, he's a really smart person, so whatever he said might be true. Even though it might not make sense to them. They think that, oh, he's so smart.
But I think that's a tribute to his sales skill. The fact that you're able to get people to believe things that nobody else can get you to believe.
It shouldn't, he's very smart.
But there's a lot of smart people too. I think Bill Gates is also super smart. You know what I mean? And Bill Gates also is a very successful salesperson, but he doesn't get attributed this reality distortion. And meaning what? Even the really shitty products that Jobs produced, he was able to convince people were going to be huge success.
Next.
Next. I had an next.
Oh, okay.
Actually, it was really cool. It was really useful and really powerful at the time. The only problem was it didn't do anything. It didn't have any software. It didn't integrate with anything else, but other than that. I had a Newton also. Newton was the first Apple handheld computer. Also beautiful hardware, but didn't. Okay, now effective distribution. This is one of the most important. We have very few formulas in our course. We very rarely study formulas, but this one everybody has to know. So it's pretty simple. Customer lifetime value must be greater than customer acquisition cost. So the lifetime value that we extract from each customer must be greater than the cost of acquiring that customer. This seems like so obvious, but in fact, when startup financial plans fail, it's almost always because they got this wrong. I mean, one of the most common flaws I see in failed startup financial plans is customer lifetime value does not exceed customer acquisition cost. Now, important to note, this will very likely not be the case at the beginning. So very likely for our early customers, this sign will be reversed. So as we build the business, we will likely acquire early customers at a loss. This is okay. It's expected and it's not fatal. But at some point, this has to turn around. At some point, every customer that we acquire, we have to be able to extract more value from than we spend acquiring that customer. If we don't do that, we're going to ultimately run out of money. So you can see right now, a lot of startups operate in the red during the growth phase. And one of the reasons is they're paying more to acquire customers than they're extracting from those customers. Why they're willing to do that is they have a business model that's built on acquiring critical mass in that market. And once they are able to acquire that critical mass, they will be able to extract long-term customer value. So, and this formula is why one very common form of startup business model or value proposition that I never like to hear goes like this. I've seen a lot of startups pitching something along this line. We have an innovative product that solves a painful problem for SME customers. SME customers, they're always struggling to generate enough business, for example. But we have a new mobile app that's going to help them generate tremendous amount of new business. And it's going to be it's a hugely underserved market. In Singapore, there's 50,000 SMEs, and we're going to focus on the smaller end, the SN, so real small companies, mom and pop shops, and we're going to own that market. So interesting or not interesting? Let's say we believe everything that they said so far. It's an innovative product, it solves a painful problem for SMEs. SMEs do suffer from this problem. They are willing to buy it. There are 50,000 SMEs. Interested or not interested? I'm already totally not interested. Because I'm convinced from now, from this moment, from the minute I hear that proposal, I know that the customer acquisition cost will be greater than customer lifetime value for this product. Because, okay, usually these really small SMEs, they cannot be acquired through like social media. They require a sales call.
Yep.
Yep. And so you have to go visit each one and maybe more than once, and they don't have any money to spend. Their marketing budget right now is like maybe $10 a month. Maybe they can spend $20 a month. So you do a sale for this company, and you sell like, when you land a customer, you generate like $100 in revenue or $200 in revenue for the whole year. It costs you more than $200 to close each customer. Why? The salesperson, in order to close one SME, the customer maybe has to visit 50 SMEs. They go 50 visits, they close one. That one customer pays them $200 a year. It costs them $500 to close that sale. Money losing forever.
Like my company is an example. Normally one sales to make a call 50 per day. And the successful rate the customer accept for the second meeting is about 50%. And in totally we have only 10%. That's mean one customer can be signed. So we take about 4 times meeting one SME customer. And the value contract normally one sales is about $200, and one customer is cost about just the contract for 1 month is about $75 US. So each time have to about 30 customers.
It's a very real challenge. And so when we have a business model like that, we must get that customer acquisition cost down and get the customer lifetime value up. And if we can do that, we're going to do that. We can be, even we can have a successful sales program, we can be closing deals, but we lose money.
So the lifetime of a customer is about at least 3 years to close the deal. So that's mean you have to make a mass customer as long as you have the database.
So usually it works like this. If we need to do, let's say, if we need to do in-person sales, so meaning we need to visit with a salesperson, we want to see that the customer acquisition cost or customer lifetime value should be more than $10,000. Then if we're doing small sales where we get paid $100 per sale, then we can do with media marketing, and if we're getting $1 per, that one on the right shouldn't say CAC, it should say CLE, but we should be getting acquiring customers from viral marketing if lifetime value is $1. So
we should. Position cost, I guess. Yeah. We're not going to lifetime value for $1, but the position cost can be $1.
So there's another column here. So, but basically, we need to be, if we need to do in-person sales, then we need to be targeting much higher customer lifetime value.
These values are from the States, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And so basically need to be adjusted to that.
So yeah, this is just more detail on that.
I'll go through that one. Could you just stop it? This is your setup SMB.
So this is where, yeah, we're just talking
My
about
assessment, yeah.
when we are targeting underserved SME markets and product needs a personal sales effort.
Well, this is actually from our business proposition, which we really try to look at the underserved SME markets. So, and to be honest, this is one of the things that we currently, we worked a lot in trying to figure out what's going to be the strategy. So we're going to be on this side of the CAC, rather than to be on this side.
So we need to figure out how to acquire these customers without expanding personal sales effort. And,
We hope it's going to work. So far, it seems to be working.
okay, so that's good. And then viral marketing. So I think a lot of startups rely on or claim that they're going to rely on viral marketing, which can be good if you're able to do it, but viral marketing is also not something that just falls out of every marketing campaign, every online marketing campaign. So if you think about how many new bits of online information, video, memes, catchphrase, like viralities internet every day. Like, it's an enormous number. And how many go viral? Tiny percentage. Like,
One at a time.
yeah. Like who saw this, like, Apple Pen? Yes, Apple Pen video.
Yeah.
Thousands, millions.
So this one went viral, but for everyone like that, there's literally millions, that don't go viral. So this is like not something where we can just expect that we're going to come up with our marketing message and go viral. And also, I think when you watch a video like that, like let's say you want to be viral, right? So let's say you had to screen all the content that was released on the internet the same day as that video, and somehow you could do that. I think probably really couldn't do it because it would be millions, but imagine you could somehow. Who would predict that would be the one that would go viral? Yeah, it's so hard, right? Because who knows, even now, who knows why that went viral?
Yeah.
I don't know
There are
why.
studies, but it's not still happening here.
Yeah. And it's so okay, but what can we do to increase our likelihood of achieving virality? So one strategy we can use is move first to dominate most important segment of the market that has viral potential. So, example, PayPal. So PayPal wanted to introduce like a new form of payment for e-commerce. So originally they focused on eBay, and not just general eBay, but on what are called eBay power sellers. Because when you look at a market like eBay, there are not an even number of buyers and sellers. There are very few sellers and very many buyers. So it's like something like 80-20 buyers and sellers, meaning 20% of participants sell to 80% of the participants. And what PayPal did was they first focused on marketing to a relatively small number, like 20,000 eBay power sellers, meaning the people on eBay that were selling the most. And why? Because they had the most painful problem, because processing payments, if you're selling one on eBay before there's PayPal, is not easy. So good value proposition for eBay power sellers. And this also has an inbuilt virality component. Why? eBay power sellers will accept PayPal, and they are in contact with most of the buyers. This encourages buyers also to get PayPal. So think about how can you, if viral marketing is part of your strategy, how are you going to increase the likelihood that message is going to go viral, or product is going to spread virally. And actually, this is usually an important component of everybody's marketing strategy, because if we have to pay for growth, then our customer acquisition cost is going to be too high. So we're almost always including some virality component in our marketing strategy to make our customer acquisition costs acceptable. And if we are factoring that in for cost, then we better figure out how to make it happen.
I remember when I attended an event in Singapore, the CEO of Zap Delivery told us that there's some kind of virality built into this business model in a way that when someone receives a package that's delivered by Zap Delivery, right, there's a chance that one of them or some of them are business owners, and they understand, okay, this is Zap Delivery. What does Zap do? Things like that. And you go online and stuff. Okay, and then they can convert those people into customers. It's built into the business model. So
it's very smart. And distribution channels. So how many distribution channels should you start with? Generally, you should start with one distribution channel and focus on one distribution channel. Because why? Because most startups will get 0 distribution channels to work. If you get one to work, you're already ahead. So if you're focusing on multiple distribution channels, you're unlikely to get even more. And in real life, one distribution channel will be more powerful, most likely be more powerful than all the distribution channels combined. So let's make sure we dominate our initial distribution channel.
Just a question. Okay. Just thinking about Coke, for example. Coca-Cola, not Coke. Right? They put huge amount of money, grand final, advertisement, things falls on TV, costing like, for the district, I don't know, $30 million. Probably now it's about $300 million, right? Super Tuesday or whatever. Why are they doing this? Is that really something that helps them maintain their position in the market? Do you really believe it helps them maintain their position in the market?
You mean Super Bowl advertising?
Yeah.
I guess they believe that.
But that's the thing. I'm wondering which business.
Well, the people from food and beverage industry told me that the number one thing that you need to invest in when you start food and beverage is advertising.
I understand that. But there's a different thing when you spend like $300 million on point for 30 seconds advertisement.
But you have to differentiate also Coke from the start, because Coke is probably one of the best recognized brands in the world. So I think the way that they make their advertising and promotion decision is going to be very different from the start. Coke has a whole different set of challenges from what we have, because they have already maybe the most recognized, one of the most recognized brands in the world. I think how many countries can you go into and say Coca-Cola and people know, even if they don't even speak English, any other words, they might know that. And you can go to some of the most remote parts of the world and you can still find Coke. So I think there they have a whole different set of challenges from us, which is once you're at the top like that, how do you stay at the top? So, I guess they must have made some calculation that maybe if they're not in Super Bowl advertising, maybe Pepsi's in Super Bowl advertising, and then suddenly, like Pepsi starts to seem like a cool drink, etc.
But I do think that Super Bowl advertising really has meant to people share it online, picture. Those people are like early adopter. They are.
Also, it's no early adoption. Anyway, something my minds are there. More ridiculous to me, for example, is actually the Olympics, because Olympics actually is not public now. Basically, in every country, you actually have to pay money to watch this one. Yet all the advertising put a huge amount of money, and in a much smaller market, I believe probably people watch Olympics up to the 84 Olympics, probably a bit after that, Barcelona, much more than now. The last two Olympics I haven't seen. Why? Because I have to buy packages to watch. So it doesn't get to people, yet they put in more money. But that doesn't make sense to me.
Maybe though, maybe they get more affluent customers as well. So if they want to reach people that are willing to pay for the Olympics, maybe the max, it's for companies that match them.
Richer people than me.
But I think there's some, there was some trend of well-funded startups also advertising the Super Bowl. Putting a bunch of money into Super Bowl advertisements to get the national boost to the US. I don't know if that's popular.
In the late 90s, I think when money was available, basically.
But don't worry, we're not going to, any of us are not going to be doing it. I think no Super Bowl television commercials for us. And actually, by the time we have enough money for that, probably Super Bowl TV won't be as interesting. So, channel stuff I'll let you go through on your own. This is also sales strategy. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. But I'm going to introduce revenue model. So I introduce revenue model so we can start thinking about innovation in our revenue model. I believe that after product innovation and user experience, after product innovation, or as important as product innovation is business model innovation. And a lot of business model innovation happens on the revenue side. So, like, example, looking at all of the different ways that we can adjust our revenue models or construct our revenue models offer tremendous scope for innovation. So let's look at some of the different elements or aspects of revenue model that we can use or business model in general that we can use to innovate that also help us to have a competitive edge. So let's use the software business as an example of evolving revenue models, evolving revenue and cost models, and how this has changed the business over the last 30 years. So, and what's been the directionality and what are the impacts? So, what was the initial software revenue model? Let's go back to the early days. I mean, let's say 1980s or 1990s. Oh, let's say B2C. So consumer software.
You buy, it's volume based mostly, I guess. You buy to the store, you buy Microsoft Office, you pay a lot of money, you install it, and you get support for X period of time.
Yeah, exactly. You went to the computer software store. We don't even imagine this today. You went to the computer software store. It was full of boxes with diskettes inside. And a manual, and later a CD and a manual. And you bought the box, you took it home, you opened up the box, you installed the software on the PC, and then you used that software until there was a new version, and then you repeated the process. You went back to the store, you bought the new version in a box, you took it home, you installed it. So
you can get a discount sometimes if you upgrade.
Yeah, maybe some upgrade discount. You might also buy some support, but basically it was. It's okay. I checked with the school during the break, and they said you're approved. Okay, thank you. Check the Facebook page for the assignment for the next class. All right. Thank you. So now let's think about this business model from the cost side. If I am let's say I'm the software company, so what are my costs? I have to write the software, debug the software, test it, come up with a final version of the software. Then I have to copy the software to diskettes or later CDs. Then I have to create the boxes, print the boxes, create the manual, print the manual, put the diskette inside the box, put the manual inside the box, shrink wrap the whole thing, put the box on a truck, take the box to a distribution center where I warehouse it until the wholesaler or retailer needs it, and then just deliver it from the warehouse to the retailer and put it on the shelf. And all that cost, time and effort, now I make a single sale to each customer. He buys that box and that's it. He's done. I don't know who he is. I don't know what he's doing. And I have got one sale exactly out of him after all this cost. Okay, so that's generation 1. Then what's generation 2? What was the next iteration of software? So let's say next big generation is download. So we do pretty much the same thing, except we cut out the store, the physical diskette. So I download the software into my computer and install it and run it locally. So this has this change in business model has tremendous cost implication for the company, because now I don't have to create this, I don't have to create the box, I don't have to sell, distribute. So basically my costs went way down. And the revenue maybe
not longer, your cost is not longer volume based.
Yeah.
Which that's actually the great advantage.
Oh yeah, tremendous. And profitability will go way up. But I'm still making one sale. The customer downloads the software and installs it, and that's basically it. Maybe they sign up for download upgrade, maybe. But that's generation 2, and we can see that the innovation in the business model here, going from shipping and selling in retail to downloading. So this is a change in channel for distribution, has a significant impact on the cost side.
There's also another important point. You can actually now build customer relationship, because if somebody downloads from you, you know who they are.
Yeah. Now
You could actually send emails, and you can sell it in binders. It's about to expire. You can get a deal to buy. You could do all these kind of things, which is, I think, just this by itself actually has tremendous value to business.
So correct. So now we still make one sale, but we know who the customer is. Okay, so that's generation 2. But what's generation now? What's the current business model for selling software?
So actually now you're not selling it, you're renting it, or you're giving the license to use it.
So what's the current model?
Software as a service.
Software as a service. So you.
No, don't have to. It depends.
I'm looking at the PC software. So PC software. So now when we do software as a service, we never download software. What do? We subscribe to software in the cloud. And this is tremendous innovation. Why? Because there's a huge sea change between the first 2 generations and this one.
I think you skipped one in the middle though. What about the licensing? So actually, right, it's like you can get the software, you can actually install it for free on your computer, right? And then you can buy licenses to use it for a certain amount of time, for example, right? So that's, I think, was in the middle between this and what you actually said.
Okay, so that's good. But then software as a service, what's the huge benefit? How is it different from all the ones that came before?
Know so much about it.
Okay, we get more information, but
Updated without.
Yeah, you basically can you control the releases to the users, okay? And that actually can prevent a lot of costs, migration costs, and planning, and all this kind of things. So it's just cycle investment as well. Okay.
release upgrades.
Yeah, you can release upgrades basically on a weekly follow. Every time I'm getting pissed off with the Apple Store because some of the apps actually releasing an update every week, which is really annoying, to be honest. you always think that you're going to miss something if you're not going to update, right? But essentially, you actually tell the user, look, I'm not taking any of your resources, which might be a beneficial. Like, you know, when people come to me, like when I bought this this laptop, and they ask me, how much hard drive do you need? And I actually told them, who cares about hard drive anymore? Because you don't have to install a lot, actually. Right? So that actually makes it much lighter as well. But from the company perspective,
Well, we're still missing the most important one.
yeah, which is the point to think about it.
What's the most important benefit
For the company.
for
Piracy. You reduce dramatically, because what happens with the things that you download and all these kind of things, the biggest problem was anytime you can break it and you duplicate the keys and all these kind of things. Now you can actually control that. Like, you know, I think Microsoft Office had like only 1 in 5 legal copy back in like 10, 15 years ago, right? So it's huge losses in costs.
So that's a good one too. But what about revenue model?
I think the subscription model is about the valuation of that.
Subscription model. Because why? Because we have now gone from one time to recurring revenue. So each sale drives recurring revenue. Instead of selling one time, we sell a subscription. And the subscription gets paid every month. And what happens at the end of the subscription period is auto renews.
Yep.
So recurring revenue, from one-time revenue to recurring revenue. And actually, this is the end point, not end point, but this is the goal of most of our revenue model innovation, to turn one-time sale into recurring revenue. Why?
Because the cost of acquisition.
Yes, because now we make multiple sales to the same person, to the same customer, and therefore our customer acquisition cost versus customer lifetime value equation is augmented a lot. Even if each monthly payment is less, significantly less than the one-time sale, but we have now created a long-term customer. And definitely we have the auto renew feature built in, and usually that's on by default. So how many customers forget to turn it off? Like like I receive emails, every couple of months, I realized that I signed up for some software like 2 years ago because the credit card I signed up with has expired, and they're trying to charge me again, and they can't charge me. And that's how I remember that I subscribed. And then bad for me, but good for them. So I think this is, when we look at the evolution of revenue models over the last few years, you see a very strong movement from one-time sale to recurring revenue. The same thing in gaming. Like, what was the old revenue model for games? Either download the games or subscription for games. Now it's all free to play. Why free to play? Because now you have in-app purchase and virtual items, which are recurring revenue streams. And also, why? Because free to play reduces friction on customer acquisition, which also reduces customer acquisition cost. Customers much more likely to try on the first try if it's free. And this brings me to another very interesting innovation in revenue model that's linked to software as a service is, and this is actually one of my favorite business model innovations in the last 5 years, it's pricing as free. Like, okay, what's the most profitable product in the history of Microsoft? Most profitable product in the history of Microsoft. Office. And how much does it cost? What's the cost of Office on a mobile phone? You want to download the fully functional Microsoft Office suite on your phone, for the phone. It's free. It's free? It's free. You can download the fully functional Microsoft Office for the phone for free. That's the price. Now, how can it be that Microsoft now gives away its its most profitable product industry.
Because who can effectively use Microsoft Office on the phone?
No, I see.
You're gonna have to use. You're probably gonna. If you use it on the phone, you're gonna have to get it to the desktop too. This makes more sense.
Oh, I use it on the phone all the time.
But you use it also on the desktop.
Yes, but not exclusively. But why do they do this?
Once you
Are they-
use the one on the phone, then you have to use it on desktop as well.
That's what I was saying.
Oh, but
It's not convinced.
no, I think it's more than that. Okay, did I tell you the story about my summer intern at Microsoft? So this summer, although we don't technically have summer in Singapore, but let's say the months that will be summer in climates that have 4 seasons, we had a bunch of interns this summer, and most of the interns, maybe I think all the interns were millennials. So one of our millennial interns was quite young. She's like 19 years old, but she's not unsophisticated. She's very mature and sophisticated. She studies overseas. She goes to university in the UK or US. She's very computer literate. She uses a computer all the
You
time.
tell us story.
So I told the story, right? And what was the conclusion?
She didn't recognize what Microsoft is.
Don't know any Microsoft products. So why does Microsoft want to give away Office for free on the phone?
Advertising.
But more than that. So that means what? Microsoft, what's the future of Microsoft Office products? Will they continue? They're obviously not going to continue to be the most profitable products because now they give them away for free. So why? What's the current strategic direction for Microsoft? What products are they betting on for the future?
Break the system.
Like,
No tablets and phones.
they already lost Windows Phone is like a joke, right? Sorry, Microsoft. No, but it is, right? They're non-entity. How many people are using Windows Phone?
Only the ones that were forced to have a Windows phone.
So, what are they really banking on in the future?
AR, augmented reality.
That's one, but
I think they don't really know, to be honest. I think they're shooting in many ways in many directions, and they're not really sure about
But I think on the software side, they're focused on cloud, Azure and Office 365. This is their core products. And
But do you think that's going to, well, okay, it may actually work for them, but that's what I'm saying, that they're shooting in many directions. Now, of course, they try to go in the cloud.
and
And the moment it looks if they won't be able to get it to the cloud, they're nearly dead.
and the value of the real value of your Office on the phone is integration, not with the desktop so much, but with Office 365. Once you have Office 365 account, a paid Office 365 account, your mobile Office becomes much more valuable. So this is a way for them to drive usage to Office 365, which is a core product. So
That's why one of the reasons why, Google basically, you get Drive for free, you get everything for free, right? So this is when you ask to get a presentation, you typically see on much somewhere else, and it's like, hey, we have it in Google Drive. We don't have any Microsoft Office. We're not using that. That was the problem. So the only reason I actually maintain Microsoft Office nowadays is for compatibility issues. If somebody asked me to convert something to Microsoft Office, but essentially, I don't open Word, Excel, or PowerPoint on my desktop any longer. So the biggest question, I think, from Microsoft perspective is if everybody else providing it for free, the only ones that actually might use it is actually the corporations. But I already have a vested interest in Microsoft because they're using this system. So
it's a definitely big challenge. So
we'll see in 10 years.
So how can
They're going to be the Nokia of that.
Yeah, or maybe less than 10.
Maybe.
So how can you innovate your pricing? I think when you do software as a service pricing, you notice also you're able to do tiered pricing. Before we talked about Starbucks pricing model, right? No? We never talked about this? Sure, okay. So one of my favorite pricing models is Starbucks, and I think that this is one of the major reasons for Starbucks success. Okay, I don't know in Vietnam, but Singapore. How much is the least expensive item in the Starbucks menu? Coffee product. So what is the least expensive coffee item in the Singapore Starbucks menu? Coffee menu.
I haven't been to Starbucks for 5 years.
The most basic coffee is the least expensive.
It costs how much? I'll tell you because you probably haven't been to Starbucks recently in Singapore. Because, so let's say you get a tall brew coffee. And you notice all Starbucks sizes are tall, right? Tall, venti, and grande, and then tall. In different languages. But okay, we need maybe different ones. So anyway, but the tall, which is a small size brew coffee, costs $3.90. How much does the most expensive coffee item cost?
$15.
$9. About eight plus. So about $8.60 for the most expensive item, which is like mocha frappa latte chino with whipped cream and cinnamon. So what is the cost difference in producing these two products?
What's the sauce?
What's the difference? What is the difference to Starbucks in the cost of producing these two products?
But it's not that far. They have to maintain their real estate.
Well, so what's that?
I think nothing.
Nothing. Because the cost difference is pennies. So, okay, so what have they done? They have solved the fundamental problem that every company faces in pricing. What's the fundamental problem that every company faces in pricing?
Get people to pay.
You have two types of pricing problem, right? One is if we price too high, people don't buy. Meaning, okay, from a coffee shop perspective, let's say I only offer one
Price
coffee.
low, nobody don't make enough money.
We leave money on the table. If we price too low, we leave money on the table. If we price too high, people don't buy. So, which rhymes, right? So it's very, I should make that into a rap. Okay, so, good idea. Okay, next time. So, let's say if I walk into a coffee shop and they only have one coffee at $6, and I don't want to pay $6, I walk out. Other people want to pay $8, and we leave $2 on the table. So what Starbucks does is they sell in the same store at the same counter. Two people can walk to the counter at the exact same time, and they can buy the exact same product for two different prices, one of whom pays double the other. One person pays $3.90, one person pays $8.60 for the exact same product in the exact same store at the exact same time. And they don't lose anybody because people walk into the store and they say, okay, like me, they say, I only want to spend $3.90, and they sell me the coffee for $3.90. Somebody else walks into the store and says, hey, I'm willing to spend $8.60. They sell them the exact same product for $8.60. And both customers are happy. This is genius, if you think about it. Like, sell the exact same product at